These Democrats don't miss a beat. They're just going for it right away. Today, you got Biden's executive orders on gun control. And this is one of these moments where they're moving the goalposts right before our very eyes. They're not even pretending like that's not what's happening. They point to two shootings recently, and then they're saying, well, because of that, we have to take all these different executive actions. And you sit there and say, well, hold on a second. Would these executive actions really save any lives? And also, if it's so obvious, if it's so clear, why not just do this through the legislative arm of the government? Because there are Democrats who don't want to be held to account for what they do in the United States Senate in particular. There are Democrats who don't want to upset their constituencies in the House of Representatives because there are still some places where you can pretend to be pro-Second Amendment and a Democrat. Now, you're never really, even if you are personally as a politician, because the Democrat Party fundamentally does not believe in guns. And I have to tell you, this is a year that we've gone through that should be a big reminder to everybody about what government tyranny can really look like. This should be a reminder that the government can decide you don't have rights. And in this case, we all sat around and because we were so scared and everyone believed the Fauci warnings and all the media panic, we obeyed overwhelmingly. And the force of government was used because it was supposed to be temporary. We'll see how temporary it is, to tell everyone to stay home. And because of our virtual society and the fact that we are an incredibly wealthy country with lots of abundance, our biggest problem for a lot of the remote working class, not the people that actually had to show up and do their jobs, was staying home, gaining weight as they ordered in food or they spent more time cooking and watching a lot of our endless entertainment options on screens. You would not have been able to do this 15 years ago. Wouldn't have had the bandwidth, the actual internet bandwidth to do this. Wouldn't have had a population that was as compliant. But now the mechanisms for control of all of us from these little screens that are dominated by leftist authoritarians, all the social media platforms, the news organizations, there are a few pockets here and there of opposition like this show. And what are they trying to do? Shut those down too. But if you were ever wondering, would a government go tyrannical? I think we've already seen that answer. And I also believe that at some level, there's always this in the back of the minds of people who own firearms, legally own firearms by American citizens who believe in the Constitution. They recognize that the Second Amendment exists as a check on absolute tyranny for the government. That's why it's there. It's actually not there for hunting. It's not there because somebody might want to go do some sporting clays on the weekend. And yet the Democrats despise this. They have bought into this idea that if only we punish the law-abiding gun owner more, there'll be less violence. I'm sorry. This goes to a much deeper philosophy of the authoritarian left. This goes to their desire to make sure that if they got to a place of absolute government control, they could also institute total control over your life and there'd be nothing to stop them. Do you really think they don't want to do that? Look at all the plans. Look at all the just constant meddling and all the different ways that they want to tell you what to do with everything. I mean, this is deeply rooted in the soul of progressives, of Democrats, of leftists, that their ideas should be filtered through this government mechanism of force, by the way, and you have to do it. And I believe that COVID lockdowns have been a very powerful reminder of just how quickly they're willing to forget all about individual liberty and how they're willing to use the force of the state to make you do things that are truly moronic and counterproductive and all under the guise of saving lives. That's what they'll say. Remember this, friends. Very rarely in history do the people that have done really terrible things think they're the bad guys. Just like the lockdowners have convinced themselves we're saving lives when they're not. People who do awful things, who violate the rights of individuals, who violate natural law, they do so because of a collectivist belief in things going better for the masses. That's what they really adhere to. So now we have this with gun control. The Biden administration's put out these 6 planned executive orders, including on ghost guns. Oh, you gotta have that one in there. How many of you had ever heard of or even seen, in any capacity, a ghost gun before now? I know this audience has got a lot of people who own firearms. How many of you are like, yeah, ghost guns? That's a thing that we should all be thinking about. It's where these kits allow you to create some parts of a firearm. But remember, there's the actual receiver, which is a tightly controlled item and serialized. There are parts that actually constitute a firearm under federal firearms law, and that hasn't changed. But they say if we get rid of ghost guns, everything will be better somehow, as if this is going to stop things. Remember when the moral panic of the moment was on bump stocks? Oh my gosh, bump stocks. This is because of the horrible shooting that we've still never found out the motive for, by the way. We still have no idea what the motive is for the awful shooting that happened in Las Vegas. But then it was, let's ban bump stocks. And even people that own guns were saying, bump stocks? And everyone was going on YouTube or going online to try to find out what the heck this thing is. And you had, memorably, USA Today put its modification for AR-15s of the chainsaw bayonet. We must stop the chainsaw bayonets. This is the madness of the gun grabbers. It just moves from one thing to another, but it's always in this cycle of what we've already talked about before. It's like they have a menu, and they go down the menu, and they keep ordering these things, and they won't actually get it through the legislature. They want to do it through the executive branch now. That's the idea, because that makes accountability more difficult. Like the little tyrants they are, they prefer to have the ability to do things when it's their turn in power, but not actually have a direct line of accountability to the people that are supposed to make laws. So, they're going after stabilizing braces, which they say can make a pistol seem more like a rifle. So let's understand this. Let's break down something like this for a second. A vast majority of homicides in this country, which went up a lot last year, by the way, because of BLM and the undermining of police. We all know that, right? Worst murder record in this country, in major cities in particular, since 1995, folks, okay? We're talking about over 20 years here. The worst murder rate in America in over 20 years. And we understand where it comes from. Now they want to disarm law-abiding folks, or they want to make things more difficult for you. Remember, these laws, they all come with penalties. And eventually it gets to a place where somebody gets caught up in one of these stupid regulations, and they want to make an example of them. And they do a deterrence prosecution, they call it. And so someone who, has a 15-round magazine instead of 10, or has a 10-round magazine instead of 7, or whatever it is charged criminally as though they're a bad person. And Democrats go, sorry, to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. That's what's going to happen. This is not going to make anyone safer. This is not going to protect anybody. But you know what it does do? It makes Democrats feel like they're doing something. They feel like they're taking worthwhile action here. And that's the most important thing. How does it make them feel? What's the real world result of all of this? What ends up being the truth of this situation? Oh, that's irrelevant, because the most important thing of all is that Democrats get to tell their friends, we're stopping gun violence. Notice the way they play all these word games, too. Gun safety. Gun safety are things like always treat all guns as though they're loaded. Keep your finger off the trigger until you've made the affirmative decision to shoot. Know your target, know what's in front of it, know what's behind it. Right? I mean, that's gun safety. Gun safety is not, we're going to have new federal regulations that'll create some really minute but annoying changes to firearms laws, as though that's going to address that over 90% of firearms used in homicides in the United States are handguns, for example. But no, let's go after assault rifles, because there's a couple of mass shooting incidents. Let's go after assault rifles right away. Turns out the rifle used in Boulder, Colorado is actually a modified pistol, but it looks like a rifle. That guy could have done exactly what he did if he had gone in there just with a pistol or 2 pistols. Nidal Hassan, You remember the Fort Hood shooter? He did all of that horrible carnage with 2 handguns. The Virginia Tech shooter essentially used 2 semi-automatic handguns, did not have a rifle. And yet we're told that if we get rid of assault rifles, which we are not even going to be able to do, there are millions and millions of AR-15s in existence, tens of millions, I think, now in civilian hands in this country, is the estimate. That's going to make us safer how? Notice they don't win the argument. They don't persuade. They don't convince. The Democrat approach to governance is, we got in power saying one thing. Now, too bad, do what we tell you. Even though it's not what we were saying we were going to do beforehand. Even though we led you to believe that Joe Biden would respect your Second Amendment. Joe Biden says stuff like that on the campaign. Oh, I respect your Second Amendment. No, he doesn't. Lies. Lies. Not lies about little things. Not lies about who's the best or the smartest or the handsomest. No. That's the stuff they went after Trump for all the time. They lie about the fundamentals of governance and your rights as an American. That's what they lie about.
Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.